You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. I am honored to be in this space again. It's been a few weeks since I've put anything out, but I want to thank those of you who have, in this season 3 of the podcast, have commented, have shared, have liked, have subscribed, and generally speaking, have engaged with conversations I've had this season. This season has been very impactful, and I'm hoping to continue to be a conduit for words that will encourage and inspire. I'm honored today to have a good friend of mine join us on the podcast. This has been a long time coming, but I'm happy that we are able to connect today. My friend has joined us. Her name is Crystal Ferguson. She's a serial entrepreneur, nonprofit founder, and narrative strategist dedicated to helping people and organizations reclaim their power and build legacy-driven lives. She is the founder of Loving You Into Freedom. Loving You Into Freedom is a national nonprofit supporting justice-impacted families. She's also the CEO of Elegant Chauffeurs, a luxury transportation company, redefining hospitality and safety. With a background in behavioral science and public administration, Crystal has raised millions in funding, advised founders and institutions, and built platforms that bridge emotional healing, economic empowerment, and cultural transformation. She's also an author, speaker, and creator focused on helping others turn their lived experiences into leadership, influence, and generational impact. Her work sits at the intersection of faith, strategy, and freedom, guiding people not just to succeed, but to become. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Crystal Ferguson, to the What a Word podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I was recalling one of my first meetings with you, and many of my listeners may not understand how churches are run, but you and I were on what we would say is similar to being on the board of trustees of a not-for-profit. I'll put it that way for people who are unchurched.
Yep.
And you had a very important event coming up, and it had to do with mentoring young people. I'm not sure, it may have been young girls, but I know it had youth in mind. And the board was discussing, the date, what it would mean to make it happen, cost, funding, etc. And I saw how people rallied around you. And not knowing you well enough, I thought she is impactful because normally when people present at the board, you are challenged with questions, etc. But I saw how the board rallied around that program, which showed me not only the response of the way you presented. You were very passionate and articulate, and it was clear to me that you really thought this program was important and life-changing. And seeing how the board responded to you said a lot to me about who you were and how people viewed you. But I had no idea then the things you were doing in terms of the work. And I'm honored to be able to meet with you to share just about what it is you're doing. And I believe our viewers and listeners could benefit to hear about the work you do. So Crystal, welcome again. And I want to thank you for making the time to speak with us. Now, I know that you have roots in Brooklyn. Could you tell our listeners who Crystal Ferguson is?
Thank you for that. And thank you for that reminder of being on the board. As you said it, I remembered sitting around the table, and that was my first board experience at that church. And it was intense. And then, like you said, people started to rally, and dedicate their budget to the program. And it turned out to be a very wonderful experience, the boss up experience that I did with Monet Biscam. I am American born, and my parents are both born in Jamaica. So I am Jamaican. But I was raised in Brooklyn. I have every energetic fiber comes from the fact that I love God and I'm from Brooklyn. So all that encompasses that intersection, it is displayed through the work that I do, the freedom that I do, the liberation energy that I possess, and just the power of using my voice. And so I try to do that in any role that I stay in. My mother can tell you since I was a little girl, I've been on fire. And I think I've come into agreement with that in my adult years to not let that dim out, but to really be the light in dark places.
Wow. And it's interesting to me, your bio highlights something that is significant, serial entrepreneurship. It's not for the faint of heart. You, by indication and by your history and experience, have tried a number of different things. What led you into entrepreneurship? If you can remember, what was the spark? What was the spark that led you into entrepreneurship?
I've always been creative and I've always been considerably a hustler. But when I was working as a high school guidance counselor from 2014 to 2018, my salary was cut in 2016. And I did not want to quit right then and there. So I said, how can I supplement my income? So the weekend that they did cut my salary, it was the same weekend that I walked into the Uber office because Uber was really still pushing forward in the New York, New Jersey region. And I followed all the steps to get my TLC license. And the TLC is the Taxi Limousine Commission of New York City. And they give you 90 days to complete the process. I completed the process in 12 days from start to finish. I was very much adamant that I need to get this on the road because my salary is cut. I don't want to interfere with the progress that I have with my students, but I needed to make a way for myself. And I made it work. And so that was my entry point into entrepreneurship. I was still working full time. And then in the evenings and the weekends, I would drive full time. And within 2 years, I ended up transitioning into fully delving into entrepreneurship. And I do want to note that within the first 10 days of me driving with Uber, every woman that came into my vehicle stated, oh my goodness, you're the first female driver that I've had. Can I have your number? We're exchanging stories and experiences that we've had with having weird interactions with drivers. Let me just say that. And so once I saw the need was there, I said, oh, I need to build something accordingly. So literally 10 days after I started driving Uber, I started my company, Elegant Chauffeurs. And I've just been building businesses ever since. And I think when there's a need in the marketplace and God gives you a vision, you have to execute it, not necessarily wondering how it's going to get done. Because I do believe that when God gives you a vision, he's going to fund it. Some way, somehow, he's going to fund it. And so that's been the trickling effect going on 10 years now. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because what I have learned about people who start businesses is when you're working with people, it's important to have boundaries. And some people, it's intuitive for them. They know how to charge, they know how to navigate people who are trying to get over, but everybody does not have that. Did you learn the boundaries with people by trial and error, or was it something that was natural to you in terms of being a business person?
I'm going to say it was trial and error because I was not pricing properly or I was hesitant. Sometimes you try to be too nice, too accommodating, to your own detriment. And so I had to learn in real time industry standards and making sure that I was pricing according to the industry. So that way I'm not watering down the industry, especially because I'm offering a premium service, making sure that I'm in line with premium value of what they're getting, but also the cost. And that also is a reframe because it's an investment. People who like to spend on luxury look at it as an investment rather than like an expense. And I think just reshaping over time, but I learned very quickly that I need to price appropriately. And it did price people out of the experience that I offer because I did run into people who would say, oh, I want to support your business. But they thought that that was like a charitable thing to do. The price is the price. We're not negotiating down because that is the price. And I think when you're doing too much conversation, then people try to haggle. But when you get on an app, there's no haggling. If they give you the price, you press accept and swipe, and then there's no conversation. So I realized also to put those kind of systems in place, those boundaries where if it's not where we're cultivating a customized proposal for the work that you would like for me to do, then it's just a standard price what the bride requires.
Wow. Has it been surprising to you how many people desire entrepreneurship but just don't have the mentoring to get into it? There are people who really would want to take that leap, but they just don't have the type of support and resources.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a resurgence in it lately while people have either transitioned through COVID, being laid off, or even last year when a lot of Black women specifically were laid off up to 700,000. And people are pivoting and knowing their worth and their value in terms of what they have, what they bring to an organization, and now bundling and packaging it in a way that people can contract them. But there is a mentorship piece that's needed because it's important to rely on people who have done it to help skip the steps of that trial and error. If you're learning from someone who has put in the time, it kind of helps you get to your next faster. And so investing in mentorship and investment doesn't always need to be money, but investing time in mentorship is important because there are a lot of free resources through nonprofits that support you on the journey of starting your business. And I think people just have to be intentional about the vision that they have and how they want to carry it out rather than just jumping into it with no direction.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that we started with when we were both on the board because it had to have been around that time you were also dealing with something pretty personal, which led you into the organization and service that you now do. Listeners and viewers should know that Crystal is also an author, and I don't believe this is her first book, but it's the first one I've read, Loving You into Freedom, the Ultimate Wellness Guide for Justice Impacted Families, Friends, and Communities. It would have been around the time that you were also dealing with something pretty personal, which has thrusted you now into a work that is touching the experiences of so many people. You are dealing with providing support and services for people who have loved ones who are incarcerated. Could you talk to us about your journey into that work?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that I found a note in my phone. I'm a very big note taker, and I have over 10,000 notes in my phone, just for context. And I found a note from 2013, and this is before I got into this particular work. I did go to John Jay College of Criminal Justice, so I've always been interested in justice. I've always wanted to be a part of the reform. And so it was always in alignment. I wanted to be an attorney, and now I say that I am an attorney through my advocacy work for families, for justice impacted individuals. And so My powerful partner was wrongfully convicted and served 10 years in New York's state prison. And in navigating that process, we saw what families, what individuals, what community members, what friends were like dealing with on a level that is often overlooked. Most people don't even investigate how the family is feeling. They're going to work, they're showing up, but they don't know that invisible weight that they're carrying as they are loving somebody into freedom. And even the name that we chose for the organization speaks to giving people permission to love someone out loud, because the community, the wide community it is, there are 2.3 million people incarcerated in America right now. So you have maybe 3 people that love them. So we're talking over 10 million people right now that are affected by it, not even counting the people who have been formerly incarcerated and their family members who's on probation and parole and all the things that come with the release. And so we realized like there was no blueprint. And Toni Morrison said, if there's a book that you want to read and you can't find it, write it. And I have done that so many times, even if it's creating a program or seeing an injustice somewhere. If I don't see a solution, I have to create it. I have to do my part and contribute. And so Loving You into Freedom started out as an article just to talk about what I learned. And then it turned into the book. And then after we published the book, it turned into the framework for the nonprofit organization. And so very intentionally, our logo is the bridge, because we can't do it by ourselves. And we have vetted and found other organizations that are supporting people, but the families don't know where to find them. So we look at ourselves as a resource hub to let people know, here's an organization that's doing this, that can help your family. Here's a court system that is doing this. Here's a reentry program that is doing this. Here's a wellness circle that is doing this. So literally just plugging an ecosystem, if you will, of resources that will be able to help people get through it, but also in a way that they become developed personally, professionally, and in a way that they can contribute back into society. And that's for both the families as well as the individuals who are coming home, or even individuals who might have life on the inside. If you can transform your mind, it doesn't matter where your body is physically housed. And so we just try to really present the mental wellness around the incarceral experience.
Wow. It's heavy, man, and I have to sit with this for a while because I'm reading not only your book, but the new Jim Crow, and there is a striking study that Michelle Alexander, the author, highlights. She says Black women, just in amplifying the burden Black women carry. She says, for the most part, Black women carry, and I'm summarizing, the stigma, the judgment, and the weight of loving men and children who are incarcerated. Could you talk to us about what you experienced in terms of the stigma of loving somebody who was incarcerated?
I didn't deal with it for too long because I created boundaries around it. I made sure I understood how sacred my relationship was. Because a lot of people will have opinions because they haven't experienced it. But let the one thing happen and now it's your family member. Oh my gosh, you don't want somebody judging or prejudging or saying something kind of ignorantly. And so I made sure that I recognized very early who would be a part of like my personal advisory board as I navigated that experience. And it wasn't a lot of people, but the ones that did, they knew what time you would call. So they knew like, all right, she's going for a visit or she's on the phone, and they supported it. Like even down to my students, if he would call and I'm at work, they're like, "Oh, Fergus on a call. We'll be right back in her office," and it works in a way where it reflected a model of like me not being shameful about it or feeling shameful about it, but amplifying the fact that I'm speaking to a human that happens to be located in a place that isn't desirable. That doesn't mean that he is not desirable, you know? And I think just the reframing and how I loved him into freedom in real time allowed for other people that I didn't even know were watching me to be inspired to say, oh, and the more I shared my story with strangers, the more I realized how large the community was because they would say, oh, me too, my father, my cousin, my daughter. And I'm talking like even within the church. Now I'm like, so why you ain't say nothing? But the space wasn't created for comfortable conversations to feel again sacred and held because there's so many layers of residual effects that come with that. And again, there's an invisible weight that can't be verbalized, but it is shared amongst the people that know. And so during the close to 4 years that he was in there and I was outside, I was very carefully calculated on what I shared, what I did not share, just to make sure that holistically, I'm protecting what God gave to us and also protecting how, and I didn't know at the time, but how God was cultivating the framework through us for what we've created.
You spoke about the silence among those who have loved ones who are incarcerated. And in your work in dealing with supporting families and individuals who have loved ones who are incarcerated, how heavy is the judgment that their loved ones the loved ones who are incarcerated? How heavy is the judgment?
It's pretty heavy, especially if people are judging what the crime associated with, their case might be, and people add on additional judgment. There's already a judgment there because someone is incarcerated, but then when they're like, well, why? People get nosy now and they want to know all the details. And I think the judgment just comes because people are fearful of what they don't understand. And while people are not their worst mistake, and we're never celebrating like committing crimes ever. And we always want to respect the families that have been victimized because of somebody doing a crime too, and understanding that there is a place. But when it comes to the judgment, I see how it creates an identity issue with the family members, with people who are incarcerated. But then I always look to the grace that God gives us, whether we're in prison or out of prison, what it means to have a real second chance. And I think when I talk to families, I'm always encouraging to look at how God looks at you. Don't even worry about the judge, the judgment, all the things. Restore your identity, restore your family member's identity. Don't look at them as a number, look at them as a human, like dignity of being a human being, even if you made a mistake. Like there is still grounds for restoration. And so just encouraging, but I do see how judgment plays a part on just how people live their lives in general.
It's sobering, man. And I wanna, while we delve into heavy topics, just commend you again on doing the work because many of my listeners and viewers may know I'm a public defender, and so often I'm there for sentencing portions of a hearing, not just for local jails, but for people who are going off to prison. And invariably, family members are in the gallery, and you'll hear them shout, "Love you," and they'll say the person's name. The person is taken away. The family may gather outside to encourage each other, be crying, or just to have a moment.
It's a mourning. that's happening in that moment. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're grieving.
Yeah, yeah. And that person leaves our presence, and very often, if you're not connected to us, they leave, and nobody really thinks about what the family must go through. But your book highlights some of the financial implications of having a loved one who is incarcerated, the financial implications on those who are left behind. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen and what you've experienced in terms of what the impact is on the loved ones financially?
Yeah, the impact is great because the system is predatory. So if you have money, it works. You could sustain. If you don't, you're stressed out. And then it might be small costs, but they add up and it sneaks on you, whether it's the phone or now they have the tablets so you can buy stamps. So then there's food that you must buy, commissary you might put on the books, the gas that it takes to go visit a loved one, the money to spend on vending machines when you get inside, the clothing, the shoes, um, the care packages, whether it's cards or books, education materials. Um, and the financial strain monetarily is one thing, but there's like a financial strain mentally, if that makes sense, that happens as well. Um, I think we saw enough in our experience and to know that some people behind the wall don't spread out the responsibilities in their ask. So they might be asking one person to do everything, and that could be real weedy. So my partner was very particular and intentional about making sure that it was not lopsided. He had so much support, so much love. His family loved him, and it was balanced where nobody felt like they weren't involved. But you have some people that don't have support, right? And so they go through the process by themselves, working for cents at a time, trying to fund their way through. You have restitution fees that you might be taking out of your paycheck, that your check might only be $10 every 2 weeks. So the financial strain goes, it's really wide. And I learned recently that the owner of all the communication is one man who also owns a basketball team. And it just feels monopolized. And so what we have created is a solution to make at least the food packages and the visits more affordable. So we have our own transportation program where we only charge $50 per person to go from New York City to up to New York State, certain facilities to see their loved ones on the weekends. And then our food packages, we have bundles, and we're also not like hiking up the price to the point where people can't afford that to send their loved one and then also feed their own families in their houses. So it takes a toll over time, like it just takes a toll. I know people who have like put on auto pay, like, commissary, which helps, because then they can go shopping every 2 weeks at the commissary and get things that they might like just to help them sustain. But it does definitely take a toll, which is why we help empower family members to make passive income because you cannot do it without the strain if you don't have a passive income stream because you have a fixed income somewhere else. And so we try to empower people to think of other ways that they can be creative too, so that way something else funds their loved one. But yes, the financial strain is great for families and friends.
And I don't want my listeners and viewers to miss what Crystal highlighted. when you talk about commissary and putting money on books, you are giving us a new framework to support people who are away and in a place they have no control over once they've been sentenced. And, to your point, and you spoke about travel, how much control does the loved ones of a person who is incarcerated have over where they're placed?
Oh, they have no control. And there was a researcher that reached out to me recently, and she was in the thick of it, going on visits, taking those 8-hour bus rides to kind of see what it is. And there's a bill, I'm forgetting the name, but it was talking about placement and how far someone is from their family. But I think I said to her, the system does not care. They like, okay, you want them to be human with thinking about, they're just adjusting to how they grade punishment, and they place you wherever they have room. It's not considerate of your family. It's not, because they're looking at it like your loved one should have been considerate. So now we're going with the back and forth. And so it's not meant to be easy. And I try to let people know that, like, we can ask for consideration, but they're not obligated to be considerate because they are working within their institution as it has been designed, just like Michelle Alexander talked about in the new Jim Crow. It's a system that simply replaced slavery, mass incarceration. And so if you understand that, you can kind of understand that it's not about you. It's about what works for them. Systematic.
Crystal, I want to ask you, because you are a speaker par excellence too. How much time do you have to spend to get groups of people who are not impacted by having a loved one who is incarcerated to see those people as humans?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I've calculated that time, because truthfully, some family members don't see their loved ones that are on the inside as human. And it might not even be somebody distant or a stranger. It might be their own flesh and blood that might not see it, right? It might be people who say they're believers that might not even believe that they're human anymore. It exposes people. When people don't see them as human, it exposes who you are, who you see yourself as. And I think that's more eye-opening to me. I'll just hear how people relate to people that are incarcerated. And I'm just like, at any given moment, it could be you. Wrong moment, wrong place, wrong time, wrong incident, lack of judgment for a split second can shift it. And I think for so long, people have had a false sense of who looks like a criminal. It could be anybody. It could be your mom. It could be your dad. It could be your child. It could be your brother. It could be a sister, your cousin. It could be your landlord. Like, you, and people forget that people are people and people do things. People do things. So I think the humanity of it all is just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, that could have actually been me, circumstantially. And then having grace to just acknowledge people's humanhood, not to condone anything that they've done, but to acknowledge their personhood and to believe that somebody can change at any given time.
Being a Black-owned business extends so much further than making great products. It's about representing the 8 out of 10 Black businesses that failed within the first 18 months of launch. It's about giving hope to the 4% of startups that are founded by Black women. It's about using our influence to affect change in the communities that look like us, and proving to the next generation that no matter the color of your skin, nothing is impossible.
And could you talk to us a little bit about what, and I want to get into what the loved one who is incarcerated in terms of your study, because your book really lays out for me some concepts and some principles that I didn't ordinarily think about.
Mhm.
But talk about the fear factor for those who have loved ones on the inside. What was your own experience dealing with the unknowns about the prison system?
The fear factor, I think there were certain things that my partner shielded me from until after he was free. I didn't even know certain things were like happening. And I think he did that because he knows how empathetic I am and he didn't want me to worry. And so I appreciate and I honor that. I think when I watched Ava DuVernay's film documenting 13th and the experience of the exonerated five, I was like in tears, weeping, because I was starting to imagine like at any given moment, this could be his situation. And I know it terrifies families. And a lot of times, many of the documentaries or the art that's created around prison scares people. And you know that it's a scary place, and you know that it houses people who've done some scary things. And so your mind wanders, your imagination just grows, but it's always in the fear side. But I also watched a different side of understanding the camaraderie that happens in there, the brotherhood and sisterhood that is formed, the caring for each other, the cooking for each other, the sharing, the modeling of rules that people in the free world aren't living by. You know, there are standards in place. They are governing each other. And I'm like, that's community. But in so many ways, like they have rules that they abide by internally of respect. You don't steal from nobody, or there are consequences. And so I think that's the part that you don't see, but you could hear it on the phone. You could hear the respect or the disrespect and how it's handled. Like there's just a nuance. And then there's a visual that I love to go back to with Maverick City, Kirk Franklin. They came out with an album inside of a prison. They sent the lyrics to the men in prison and they're singing. They literally went in and recorded the album. And I'm like, these men are in a prison singing about freedom. And they are just, I was like mind blown. And I think there are always two sides of what's happening at the same exact time. And I think while there's fear, there's also faith happening at the same time. And it's what are we leaning into? That could create a frequency around our loved ones that might be on the inside. If you're just generating fear, fear, fear on the phone and no faith in helping restore hope in them, that's going to translate. That's going to make them angry. So we have a job to do when we're on the side of the phone or other side of the pen to at least infiltrate the mind with positivity, because that translates some way or another. But yeah, I hope that answers it.
I recall not just with my clients, but with friends of mine who were incarcerated, just hearing them speak about the moments they were alone in their own thoughts and, the moments they cried or they had regret or the current circumstance they looked at and they wondered whether there was any hope. And I want you to talk to us about what you've learned about managing, if it's an appropriate term, managing the emotions of a loved one who is incarcerated. What have you learned in your work and in your own experience about managing their emotions?
Yeah, I think so. Because I have a background in behavioral science, I overstood that concept. But when it came to my personal experience, he had to teach me mental strength. he gave me an ultimatum one time. And he was like, because I was like so passionate and crying and like overwhelmed. And he was like, let me tell you something. If you can't do this, I need somebody that's mentally strong. And it checked me because it's like, think about that. What think about what you can do to someone if you're just crying on the phone and then when they hang up and they're ruminating on that, what that will do to them. And I was not aware of that. And I was like, and it happened so early. I think like 5 months into us being together. And when he called back the next day, I was like, no, I could be strong. Be strong. And I really had to work my mental strength, my muscle up because he had done so much work to get himself to a place of nothing's gonna break me. And I think it's important for the people on the other side of that phone to know nothing, you can't allow anything to break them mentally because they have to survive this with a sane mind. And so he was able to teach me how to be mentally tough, especially because the place in which they are requires it. And mental health is real. And I think if we're not careful or we're not cognizant and considerate, we can be contributors to the mental health decline of someone who's on the other side of the wall, and vice versa. Because you have some instances where there's a lot of control from behind the wall, and women and men on the outside are feeling like they're in bondage because they might be getting that stern kind of energy and then it's not translating. So I do talk about the personal and professional, the personal development on both sides, the spiritual care on both sides, because while I say I loved my partner Emroy into physical freedom, he loved me into an emotional freedom where I was always falling apart. And it was just like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take control of yourself and create a system in which you can function in the world, regardless of what's happening. And so, yeah.
And I really like how your book starts off with the foreword by Enroy, that you've given him voice to speak, and you and I have talked about the work you both did collaboratively to ensure that he had input once he was being released in terms of choosing even the apartment. And I want you to amplify that for us as well. But as you spoke, Crystal, I thought about my own life, and there were things that I did when I grew up in what you would call a good home. But I had friends, I had peer pressure, I made poor decisions. Any one of those decisions, I had, traffic issues. I traveled with friends in cars who, if we had been pulled over at the wrong time, could have led me into a cycle that I wasn't prepared for just easily. And I look at the stories of so many loved ones who are incarcerated who, I look at their stories and sometimes, man, and it was just but for the grace of God why our paths ended up differently. So I really like the grace that you have given to loved ones who are incarcerated. I think the work you are doing forces us to look at the way we've erased people who made, some of them, decisions that have caused them to be there, but many of them have, as you've also indicated, are not guilty of any crimes, but because of circumstances, you know, a jury found them guilty, and those people deserve to have their names remembered. And you highlighted, most importantly, couples who have done the same thing that you're now doing. And you've, in your introduction, mentioned a few people who've loved people on the inside. Could you say a little bit about some of the people who were direct mentors to you, or we're not even aware that their example gave you the framework for how you loved on Enroy?
Yeah, I mean, the people that I referenced in the book were all celebrities as it relates to like the hip hop industry, which I'm a avid hip hop fan. And it's so interesting because a lot of time has elapsed where people are looking at where their lives are now, and it might contradict what I wrote. But it doesn't negate the fact that in the moment of transition, these people were there for these people. And so I mentioned Yandy being there for Menzies, and we saw it in real time on Love and Hip Hop. Jay-Z, one of his best friends, Emery Jones, he even has like a, a a audio that kind of captures what happens when you get that phone call. You have a collect call from, and then it's a letter that he wrote as a friend to his friend on the inside so he could hear it and everybody can hear it. And then to see how he set Emery up for success post prison. Emery is doing wonderful things in the community. He has a store in Soho called Paper Planes. And just, I look at what happens when you love people into freedom. That transition is not easy. And so when you do it at a high level, you can take from that. So I remember Keisha Kaur being on an interview on the Breakfast Club talking about how her and Gucci Mane's relationship, they would keep each other accountable for working out on the phone. And so just taking those lessons from all of these experiences, and it represents the people at large who are going through it, but there's no visual of it. And so I wanted to highlight it. And even Papoose, who loved Remy Ma into freedom, and looking at the male-female dynamic where it's not a woman that's always holding somebody down, and really honoring that. And so I don't know them personally. I want to send each of them the copy of the book. And I've attempted several ways, but I think even if that doesn't happen, the inspiration and the testimony has already been cemented in history. And so I think we can all take from what people have done well and build on that. And I think it's important to have grace and to include people in their process, especially of redemption and return, because so many times people will create atmospheres and say, here, I did this for you. But you didn't ask them what did they want. You just gave them assuming that you knew what they wanted. So like you said, before my partner came home, we had the JPEG tablet, so I could send him pictures of every apartment that I went to see. And then he would send me lists of like how we could furnish it, like down to the colors, because he's very visual and he's a designer by heart. And so then the translation from what was said on the tablet, and then when he comes home and it mirrors exactly what he envisioned and created, it's like, oh, this is a co-creation. It's not just here. The just here was prison. They said, here's a bed, here's your pillow that probably feels very hard, and this is what you have. And so it's important for family members, friends, and community members not to become prison correction officers when your loved ones come home. That's not your place. You don't have to police them. They've been policed enough. You do have to love them. You have to love them and be patient enough, because there's a lot that comes with coming home. There's a lot of patience that's required, because that transition is not easy. It's not swift. But if you're patient and you give people room to adjust and to become, you'll be surprised with how they blossom and how they flourish.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. What is life like for someone who has completed their sentence now and are on the outside? Talk to us about what rehabilitation and restoration looks like for the person now who comes out having completed sentencing.
It looks different for everyone. How well you prepare in terms of what it is that you desire to do. There are a lot of reentry programs. There are also a lot of collateral consequences when it comes to getting housing, getting a job, not being pigeonholed into certain industries for work. There are some people who even finish their sentence but can't be released because they need to be approved for housing in a certain location to avoid being, if it's someone who has a sexual offender label, there are parameters that you can't be around. And so it literally depends. And I think the more prepared you are, it's helpful. But what I've seen is that some people can be super prepared and the world at large is not embracing that. And so I encourage you carving out your own path, what it is that you want to do, and try to fund your dream that way, because the world is unkind. It's unkind. You could do all that time and they can still say, you were there, so discarding you? No, create your own way, because I think over time, your self-esteem kind of gets lower because there's a level of rejection that keeps happening for something that you already paid for. And it's just like, at what point are we going to say, they did the time, let's move on, right? So I've even started questioning, like, what's the point of prison? If we're going to create another prison when they come out of prison, you might as well just do that from the jump and they never have to go in there and deal with all the mental combats that they have to deal with being through that experience. And so it is what you make it. It is what you create it to be. Some people come out and thrive. Some people come out with support. Some people come out with no support. But the will that you might have, the potency of ideas that come up when you're in an environment that allows you to create, it does something. And I think it really varies from person to person. But let that be a mirror for even in the free world. Your life varies person to person. We have the rich, we have the poor, we have the stable, we have those that are on fixed income, those that are serial entrepreneurs. It is what you make it. And God gives us a limited amount of time on this earth. And I think people might look at somebody who has a diagnosis or a prison sentence as like they're the only ones with a time clock on their head. No, you got it too, whether you did time or not. And so I think people have to really think about the grand scheme of life and us being here for a reason, for a certain time, and then it's over. And then what do you contribute, even in those spaces or even on the outside? If you just came, did nothing, and left, did you really live?
Yeah. Crystal, this is the moment where my listeners and viewers are often asking the question, how can we help? Because what you've spoken about are mothers who are incarcerated, whose kids may be subject to foster care if they don't have families. You're talking about sons who are incarcerated, who, it may be difficult for their families to find the funds to keep connections going, because you described the predatory phone system and I imagine these rates are usurious. If the family doesn't have the funds, then connection is difficult. And I know that there are other ways that people are perhaps thinking, I could be of help in this way. Your book is also the name of your not-for-profit. Could you talk to us about ways that people can support loved ones who are incarcerated, or support the families of loved ones who are incarcerated at every stage, while they're in and when they're out? And I know we could talk for hours, but I'm hoping that we could at least give some people some guidelines or some support resources.
Yeah, I would say to support families who have loved ones that are incarcerated, the first thing that you could do is be an ear. just that don't cost you nothing but some time and a non-judgmental ear. Some people just need to vent. However, we do know that people can be gossipy and hear your information and bring it back. And so we have a partnership with BetterHelp that provides therapy up to 12 weeks of free therapy for families. So if they sign up on our website, we're able to send them the voucher and they can do that. So you can refer them to a therapist through this model that we have in this partnership. But I think offering to drive them to a visit, you don't have to go inside, but to offer that can alleviate the burden of what that is going to cost. And they might need somebody to like help with the anxiety going to a visit and then to deal with the emotional drain and sadness that comes with after you have to leave your loved one inside. That's a simple way of, supporting. I think even like I said, some people have it on auto pay to do like commissary. You can buy stamps for people. I think it's like $100. No, I think it's $10 for 100 stamps. You could probably do that. So that way they can, send messages back and forth to their loved ones. But there are a ton of ways to be of service that wouldn't cost too much. And then through our nonprofit organization, you could purchase a book to give to a family member because you might not know what to say, but that book was carefully written to help with that. So that way you don't feel like you're saying the wrong thing. We got you covered. And then supporting our nonprofit organization because we are doing the work and we have developed something that is going to outlive us because it doesn't take away from what the institutional structure is, but it complements what the families and the friends and the community members need. So spread the word, give people permission that they can love someone into freedom.
Thank you so much. And Crystal, I want to thank you for your transparency as well. You've shown that, for many individuals, this journey is a painful one at points. It's also sprinkled with hope at points, but it takes a lot of intentionality to see someone, to love them through this experience and to love on yourself while you're loving on that person. I want to know if you would mind sharing ways people can connect with you. Please give us all the handles, and I'm hoping that my listeners and viewers, if once Crystal says it, I'll also put it on the screen. But please share with us ways people can connect with you so they can connect with not only your journey, but the resources that you have available.
Yeah, so for this in particular, I would say my email is the best, crystal@lovingyouintofreedom.com. You could also visit www.lovingyouintofreedom.com or www.lifesupport.com. And that's where we have the food and care packages, the educational resources, as well as the prison transportation program. So if you wanted to gift a family a prison visit, we would cover that as well. And then on Instagram, you can find me at ChryssyJ, ChryssyJ. And then we have Elegant Chauffeurs. If you're looking for luxury transportation, feel free to visit www.elegantchauffeursllc.com. And then lastly, if you want to be coached by me, my consulting and coaching firm is called Created to Inspire. And you can find us at createdtoinspire.org.
And my listeners, and thank you so much, Crystal. I'll put in the notes and on the screen what she's just said. I want my listeners and viewers to know just last Sunday, I connected with Chris about setting up something to talk, and she was doing the transportation for families in Ellenville. Prior to that, she had a speaking engagement. So everything she said is what she's actively doing. Crystal, just to close out, I was wondering if you could say something to the person who is incarcerated and also to the the loved ones of that person who's incarcerated.
Yeah. So for the person on the inside, I would say free your mind. Where you are is not where you are. And lean into the opportunity to be able to be one with yourself. Many people don't get the chance to have sacred time with themselves. So if you look at this experience as something where you get to become one with yourself and to work on yourself, I think will transform not only you, but anybody connected to you. And for the family members, I would say the more you grow, the more your loved one can grow. So continue being on your personal development journey, because that translates with how you speak to your loved one, how you pray for your loved one, how you cover your loved one. And the blessings come full circle. Create a personal shield of advisory around you. Do not pollute it with negative commentary. And just know that there are people who are experiencing the same thing. The minute you open up is the more you'll find community.
Wow. And Crystal, if you could you talk to us the moment you were reconnected in person with your loved one? What was that moment like, if you don't mind sharing?
It was very surreal. I was just looking at the video a couple days ago. Because one of the places that we do the prison transport to is the last place that he left. So whenever we see like that gate that he came out of, we're like, oh my goodness. It's like a reminder every time. But I remember the first time he came out, I was stunned because we talked about it so much. We prepared for it, but it was really happening. And I just kept saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh. Because you can want it and pray for it and hope for it, but when it happens, it's like, now what? And so we embraced, and I feel like the journey since then has just been so revolutionary, and so powerful because we let love dictate how we maneuvered. And it's like God has really like shown out. And it's just been a blessing, a continuous blessing. And I mean, like, just that first moment was really, really like, I can't describe it like to compare it to anything else, but it was amazing to just embrace and see, though. That's all it took to open up a gate and you're just free now. That's all it took. And so thinking about even that in the sense of like freedom is in your mind first. So he was already free to me. He just had to physically catch up.
And I want you to thank him on my behalf. Mr. Bishop signed my book, and I really appreciate the words from both of you, and I really appreciate the work that you're now doing. I don't think this will be our last time in the short term connecting, because as I indicated to Crystal, we need her work, not only in the public sector in which I work, but many of our churches that have a ministry that connects with individuals who are incarcerated, I think could use the support and the resources that you offer. So Crystal Ferguson is an author, a speaker, a serial entrepreneur. Her book, Loving You into Freedom, The Ultimate Wellness Guide for Justice-Impacted Families, Friends, and Communities, is available now wherever you purchase your books. I'll put some handles in the notes about ways you can get, and I'm sure Crystal has her own portal where you can order the book directly as well on her website. Crystal Ferguson, thank you so much again for joining me as a guest on the What a Word podcast.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me.